The year was 2075. Humanity had reached Mars and built a small base on Europa, but had not yet traveled beyond their solar system. Most people on Earth still lived normal lives, while only a lucky few got to work in space. Commander Jack Nelson guided his patrol ship near Neptune's orbit. It was supposed to be a routine mission. Nothing exciting ever happened out here. He sipped his coffee and stared at the radar screen. Then he saw it, a blip that shouldn't be there. "Control, this is Neptune Patrol 6. I'm picking up an unknown object. It's big. Very big," Jack said. The radio crackled. "Neptune Patrol 6, can you visual confirm?" Jack turned his ship toward the object. What he saw made his coffee mug slip from his fingers, splashing hot liquid across the control panel. A massive vessel, unlike anything humans had built, glided silently through space. Its surface shimmered with lights and patterns that seemed to move like liquid. "Control, we have visitors," he whispered. Within hours, the news reached Earth. The alien ship had sent a message in perfect English, requesting to meet with Earth's leaders. They called themselves the Galactic Conclave, a union of 37 advanced species who had been watching Earth for decades. 3 days later, Susan Blackwell stood in a hastily prepared meeting room at the United Nations. As Earth's top diplomat, she had been chosen to greet the aliens. Her hands felt cold, but her face remained calm. The door opened, and in walked a being that looked almost like a tall human, but with silver-blue skin and eyes that changed color as it moved. It wore what seemed to be a flowing robe made of material that rippled like water. "I am Ambassador Zixtal," the alien said, its voice strangely musical. "It is my pleasure to formally welcome Earth to the galactic community." Susan stepped forward. "On behalf of Earth, we are honored to meet you." Zixtal smiled, but Susan noticed something in that smile. A look she recognized from too many diplomatic meetings. Condescension. "Your species has done well," Zixtal said, walking around the room and touching the furniture curiously. "For a civilization so young, you show amusing determination. Your technology is quaint, of course, but we find your cultural development fascinating." "Quaint?" Susan asked, keeping her voice even. "Oh yes. Compared to even the youngest members of the Conclave, your technology is quite primitive, but that is to be expected. You've only just begun your journey among the stars." Over the next 2 days, Zixtal explained that the Conclave wished to invite Earth to join their alliance. They would share some technology and allow humans to trade with other worlds. In return, Earth would follow Conclave rules and help with minor tasks. Susan felt uneasy. She could tell they were being offered the bare minimum, treated like children. But she also knew this was humanity's chance to leap forward by centuries. They needed this alliance. "We accept your offer," she told Zixtal on the 3rd day. The alien nodded. "Excellent. Earth will be granted probationary membership status." 6 months later, human ships began working for the Conclave. They were given the simplest jobs: carrying cargo, maintaining space stations, and other basic tasks. When Jack Nelson, now captain of a human Conclave joint ship, suggested that humans could help with security, his Conclave supervisor laughed. "Your weapons are charming antiques," the supervisor said. "Perhaps in a few hundred years, you'll be ready for such responsibility." Jack said nothing, but his jaw tightened. Meanwhile, on Earth, Susan watched the reports coming in. Humans were learning fast, but the Conclave shared little of real value. They were being kept at arm's length. "They think we're primitives," she told her assistant. "They're giving us scraps and expecting gratitude." "Should we withdraw from the agreement?" her assistant asked. Susan looked out the window at the night sky. "No. For now, we smile and nod, and learn everything we can. Our time will come." She didn't know how right she was. 3 years had passed since Earth joined the Galactic Conclave. Lieutenant Annie Reeves sat at her small desk aboard the Conclave diplomatic vessel Eternal Harmony. As Earth's military liaison, she was supposed to learn from the Conclave's military experts. Instead, they gave her data entry tasks and called it appropriate for her species development level. Amy tapped through the communication logs she was organizing. Something caught her eye. Fleet movements, urgent messages, and words that kept appearing. Swarm and containment failure. She had noticed similar patterns for weeks now. She zoomed in on a star map. Conclave ships were gathering in the Orion Arm, far from their usual patrol routes. It looked like they were preparing for war. When her shift ended, Amy approached Commander Vril, her conclave supervisor. The tall, four-armed alien was checking displays on the bridge. "Commander, I've noticed unusual fleet movements toward the Orion Arm," Amy said. "Is there a situation developing that Earth should know about?" Vril's upper eyes blinked slowly. "Your concern is noted, Lieutenant, but these are routine exercises. With respect, sir, the communication patterns suggest otherwise. These look like emergency deployments against some threat called the Swarm." Vril turned all four of his arms away from his work. "Lieutenant Reeves, your primitive pattern recognition is playing tricks on you. The Conclave has maintained peace for 2,000 years. We have no enemies we cannot handle." Amy nodded politely, but didn't believe him. That night, she copied the data and sent a private message to Earth. Meanwhile, on Earth, retired Marine Colonel Greg Martinez walked through a secret underground lab in Arizona. The room was filled with alien technology that the Conclave had discarded as obsolete. "How's it coming, Dr. Harris?" Greg asked. Dr. Liam Harris looked up from a helmet-like device. "It's fascinating, Colonel. This neural interface was designed for a species with 3 brains, but humans can actually use it more effectively with our single, more flexible brain." "Can you make it work?" "Already have," Dr. Harris grinned. "The Conclave thinks it's worthless because it doesn't follow their perfect, logical control systems. But human brains are messy, creative. We can use this interface in ways they never considered." Greg picked up the helmet. It was part of a combat system the Conclave had given Earth as historical curiosities, weapons they had used 1,000 years ago. "How many can we build?" Greg asked. "With the materials we have, maybe 50 complete systems." Greg nodded. "Start training pilots immediately. I want these ready as soon as possible." "You really think we'll need them?" Dr. Harris asked. Before Greg could answer, his secure phone buzzed. It was a message from Susan Blackwell, now Earth's president. It contained the data Amy Reeves had sent, along with a simple message: "We need to talk." 2 days later, Greg sat in the Oval Office with Susan and the Joint Chiefs of Staff. "Lieutenant Reeves is right," Susan said. "Something called the Swarm has broken through Conclave defenses in the Orion Arm, and Earth lies directly in their path." "What do we know about this enemy?" Greg asked. "Very little. The Conclave is keeping us in the dark," Susan replied. "They've increased patrols in our system, but won't explain why." "How long do we have?" "Months, maybe weeks. The Conclave's mighty fleets are falling back. Whatever this Swarm is, it's beating them." Greg stood up. "Madam President, I need to show you something. Those old weapons the Conclave gave us, we've modified them for human use, and I believe they might be more effective than the Conclave realizes." Susan's eyes narrowed. "You think the Conclave will abandon us if things get worse?" It wasn't a question. "Yes, Mom. They see us as primitive, expendable." Susan was quiet for a moment. Then she turned to the Joint Chiefs. "As of this moment, Earth is on high alert. Begin full military preparations, and Colonel Martinez, you have whatever resources you need. Train your pilots." As Greg left the White House, his phone buzzed again. A message from Amy Reeves. "The Swarm has broken through the final Conclave defense line. They're coming." The Conclave's defeat happened faster than anyone expected. Their massive defense network, which they had boasted could stand for 10,000 years, fell in just 3 weeks. Captain Frank Donovan piloted his transport ship through the debris of what had once been a Conclave battle station. His mission was simple: Pick up survivors and get out. Earth had sent 20 ships like his to help with rescue efforts, though the Conclave had been reluctant to accept human help. Scanning for life signs, said his co-pilot, Rick. Got something. Weak signal, but it's there. Frank guided the ship toward a chunk of floating metal. As they got closer, he could see a sealed emergency pod drifting among the wreckage. Bringing it in, Frank said, activating the ship's tractor beam. Once the pod was safely in the cargo bay, Frank went down to meet the survivors. The pod's door hissed open, and 3 Conclave aliens stumbled out. One of them was Ambassador Zixtal. Captain Donovan, Zixtal said, his voice weak. Your arrival is unexpected but welcome. We came as soon as we heard, Frank replied. What happened here? Zixtal's color-shifting eyes dimmed to a dull gray. The swarm. They adapted to our weapons. Our tactics. Everything we tried failed. Frank helped the aliens to the ship's medical bay. I thought the Conclave had the most advanced military in the galaxy. We did, Zixtal said. Our battleships were perfect, designed by the finest minds, following battle protocols developed over thousands of years. So what went wrong? Zixtal looked up, his eyes now a deep blue. The swarm is not like us. Not like you. They share one mind across billions of bodies. They learn, they adapt. Our perfect protocols became predictable to them. As they talked, Frank's ship moved away from the battle zone. Through the view screen, he watched a Conclave battleship fire its weapons at a dark cloud of small ships. The swarm. The cloud seemed to flow around the energy beams like water, then surround the battleship. Within minutes, the once mighty vessel was dark and dead. We're leaving the sector, Zixtal said quietly. The High Command has ordered a strategic retreat. Retreat to where? Frank asked. The core systems. We will regroup and plan our next move. And what about Earth? We're between you and the swarm. Zixtal looked away. Some worlds must be sacrificed to ensure the survival of the Conclave. Frank's hands tightened on the controls. You're abandoning us. Earth and other primitive worlds will serve as a buffer, giving us time to prepare a counterattack. The journey back to Earth was tense. When they arrived, Frank immediately reported to President Blackwell. She called an emergency meeting with Dr. Lisa Harmon, Earth's leading xenobiologist who had been studying the Conclave for years. So they're leaving us to die, Susan said after hearing Frank's report. Dr. Harmon was reviewing data on her tablet. Maybe not. Ambassador, you said the swarm adapts to patterns. Zixtal nodded. They predict our moves before we make them. Our perfect logic is our downfall. A thin smile formed on Dr. Harmon's face. And that's why you call us primitive. Because we're unpredictable. Inefficient. We don't follow perfect logic. Your point? Susan asked. The very things the Conclave looks down on us for might be our greatest strength against the swarm. Dr. Harmon explained. Human unpredictability. Our messy thinking. The swarm can't predict what we'll do because sometimes even we don't know until we do it. Susan turned to Zixtal. How much support will the Conclave provide for Earth's defense? The alien looked uncomfortable. Minimal. A small fleet to slow the swarm's advance, but nothing more. Susan stood up. Then Earth stands alone. As the meeting ended, reports came in. The swarm had entered the outer solar system. They had destroyed the outposts on Pluto and were moving inward. The fall of the mighty Conclave was complete. Now, it was humanity's turn to face the enemy. The last Conclave ships left Earth orbit on a Tuesday morning. They didn't say goodbye. They simply turned and vanished into deep space, leaving behind only a small fleet of older vessels that most considered sacrificial. Admiral John Patel stood in the United Earth Defense Command Center, watching the radar screens as humanity's supposed allies abandoned them. Around him, military leaders from every nation on Earth waited for him to speak. So, we're on our own, John finally said. We have 6 weeks before the swarm reaches Mars, maybe 2 months before they get to Earth. A general from China stood up. What about the weapons we received from the conclave? Most are useless, John replied. The swarm adapted to them weeks ago. But Colonel Martinez has something to show us. Greg Martinez stepped forward. His hair had gone gray in the past month, but his eyes were sharp. The conclave gave us some of their old technology as historical artifacts. They thought these weapons were outdated, ineffective. But we've been studying them, modifying them. He tapped a screen, showing images of strange helmets and armor. These are neural interface combat systems. The conclave abandoned them because they require too much creativity from the user. But that's exactly what humans are good at. How many do we have? John asked. 50 complete systems, Greg said, and pilots trained to use them. With these, a single fighter can match a conclave battleship, maybe more. 50 against a swarm that destroyed thousands of conclave ships, someone asked. It's not enough. It's a start, John replied. And we're not just using conclave tech. Every weapon humanity has ever built is being deployed. Old and new. Predictable and unpredictable. Things the swarm has never seen before. As the meeting continued, President Susan Blackwell prepared to address the world. Cameras were set up in the Oval Office as billions of people waited to hear what their leader would say in humanity's darkest hour. Susan looked tired but determined as the red light on the camera turned on. People of Earth, she began. Today, the conclave has withdrawn their forces from our solar system. They believe we cannot stand against the enemy that defeated them. They called us primitive. Perhaps it's time to show them what primitive really means. She explained about the swarm, about the danger it posed, and about humanity's plan to fight. We will not follow the conclave's perfect battle plans, she said. We will fight as humans have always fought, with courage, with determination, and with the unpredictability that makes us who we are. Every nation, every person, has a role to play in what's coming. Across Earth, factories turned from making cars to making weapons. Farmers provided food. Scientists worked day and night on new ideas. Old enemies put aside their fights to face the greater threat. At the edge of the solar system, Admiral Patel assembled the Earth Defense Fleet. It was a strange mix of ships, sleek new vessels next to retrofitted cargo haulers armed with weapons. Some used conclave technology. Others used purely human designs no alien had ever seen. It's not pretty, Captain Ellie Wright said as she looked out at the fleet from her ship's bridge. But it doesn't need to be pretty. It just needs to work. In his lab on Earth, Greg Martinez prepared the last of his neural interface pilots. Remember, he told them, the swarm expects patterns. Don't give them any. Be random. Be human. On Mars, Colonel Ben Carter and his soldiers dug in, preparing defenses unlike anything the conclave would have built. Messy, overlapping, and with plenty of traps and surprises. The waiting was over when alarms blared across the fleet. The swarm had destroyed Neptune's research base and was moving faster than expected. Earth stood alone against an enemy that had crushed the mightiest civilization in the galaxy. But humans had one advantage. They had spent their entire history fighting against the odds. The swarm arrived at Jupiter, like a dark cloud blocking the stars. Thousands of small ships moving as one mind. They had crushed the conclave's perfect fleets with ease and expected no real challenge from the primitive humans. Admiral Patel watched from the bridge of his flagship as the enemy approached. All ships, remember the plan. No fixed patterns. No predictable moves. Fight like humans. Captain Ellie Wright led the first attack group. Her ships were smaller and faster than the others. Attack Group Alpha, pick your targets and engage at will. This was not how the conclave fought wars. They would have formed perfect lines, followed exact plans created by computers. But humanity had its own way. Ellie's ship dove directly toward the largest cluster of swarm vessels. At the last second, she pulled up, while her weapons officer fired in 3 different directions at once. Behind her, Each of her pilots chose different targets, different speeds, different angles of attack. For a moment, the swarm seemed confused. Their strength came from adapting to patterns, but the humans weren't giving them any patterns to learn. "It's working," Ellie shouted as her ship spun away from enemy fire. "Keep changing it up." Colonel Martinez watched the battle from his command ship, where his 50 neural interface pilots waited. These men and women wore the modified conclave helmets that linked directly to their minds. They could control their ships with thoughts alone, moving with the speed of instinct. "Neural Squad, you're up," Martinez ordered. "Show them what humans can do." The neural ships shot forward, moving in ways that should have been impossible. The pilots didn't think about which buttons to push or which controls to use. They simply thought about where they wanted to go, and the ships responded instantly. One pilot, Sam Green, closed his eyes in his neural helmet and let his mind guide his ship. He thought about dancing, about the unpredictable steps of jazz, and his ship moved to that rhythm. The swarm couldn't hit what it couldn't predict. For 6 hours, the battle raged around Jupiter. The humans took losses, but they inflicted more damage than anyone had expected. The swarm began to pull back, regrouping. "They're adapting," Admiral Patel warned. "Change tactics now." Ellie understood. If they fought the same way too long, even chaos became a pattern. All ships, new approach. Switched to Plan Roulette. Plan Roulette was simple. Each ship captain had a numbered list of completely different battle tactics. Every 5 minutes, they rolled dice to decide which tactic to use next. No one, not even their fellow humans, knew what they would do next. The swarm struggled to predict moves that were decided by chance. Still, they were powerful and numerous. Slowly, they pushed the human fleet back, moving past Jupiter toward Mars. On Mars, Colonel Ben Carter and his ground forces waited. The swarm landed on Phobos, Mars' small moon, to establish a base before attacking the planet. "Let them come," Ben told his troops. "We've got a few surprises ready." The swarm expected the human defenses to be like the conclaves, structured, logical, with clear lines of defense. Instead, they found a maze of traps, hidden bunkers, and weapons placed in seemingly random locations. Ben's forces used old-fashioned guns alongside energy weapons. They set ambushes. They retreated when the enemy expected them to attack, and attacked when the enemy expected them to defend. On Phobos, Ben led a last stand that should have lasted minutes but instead dragged on for days. His soldiers used the moon's low gravity to jump in unexpected directions, fighting in 3 dimensions in ways the swarm hadn't seen before. But even with these successes, Earth was running out of time. For every swarm ship they destroyed, there seemed to be 10 more. Mars fell after 2 weeks of brutal fighting. The path to Earth was open. As the remains of the human fleet regrouped near Earth's moon, Admiral Patel received a message from a conclave scout ship lurking at the edge of the solar system. They were watching, observing how the primitive humans fought against the enemy that had defeated them. The real test was about to begin. Earth glowed blue and green against the blackness of space. It was beautiful, peaceful from a distance, but now dark shapes appeared in orbit around it. The swarm had arrived. Amy Reeves, once a lieutenant on a conclave ship, now commanded Earth's last line of defense. She stood on the bridge of her ship and looked at the faces of her crew. They were tired but determined. "The swarm expects us to fight like the conclave did," Amy said. "They expect order and patterns, so we will give them none." She activated the global command channel. "All Earth defense groups. This is Commander Reeves. From this moment on, you are autonomous. Each commander has full authority to fight however they see fit. Your only objective is to protect Earth. How you do it is up to you." This was military heresy by conclave standards. Their war doctrine required perfect coordination from a central command. But Amy knew that humans fought best when they could adapt on their own. The swarm attacked in a massive wave, expecting to overwhelm Earth's defenses quickly. Instead, they met a chaotic response unlike anything they had faced before. In the Pacific, Captain Leo Kim's ships formed a spiral pattern, then suddenly broke apart and attacked from 12 different directions. Over North America, Wing Commander Olivia West's fighters used the planet's atmosphere as cover, diving in and out of cloud layers to strike and disappear. "They can't predict what we'll do if even we don't know until we do it," Olivia told her pilots. In orbit, General Paul Dixon deployed satellites that appeared to be weapons, but were actually decoys, while hiding real weapons in what looked like communication arrays. The swarm destroyed the decoys and ignored the real threat until it was too late. Down on Earth, Dr. Lisa Harmon worked with Ambassador Zix Tal in a secure underground lab. The alien had stayed behind when the Conclave left, believing he could help. "The swarm functions as a single mind," Zix Tal explained, pointing to data on a screen. "But it must have a central consciousness somewhere, a queen or hub that coordinates all the parts. If we could find it and target it directly," Lisa said, "we might be able to disrupt the entire swarm at once." "The Conclave tried for years to locate it," Zix Tal replied, "but we were too methodical. Perhaps human intuition could succeed where our logic failed." Lisa studied the battle data, looking for patterns in how the swarm responded to attacks. "There," she said suddenly, pointing to a specific area of the swarm fleet. "When we hit them here, the entire swarm pauses for 1.3 seconds before responding. That's not normal." Zix Tal's eyes widened. "You may be right. That delay suggests signal processing. The central consciousness could be there, protected deep within that cluster." Lisa immediately contacted Admiral Patel. "Sir, we believe we've located the swarm's central consciousness, but it's in the most heavily protected part of their fleet. We'd need to deliver a weapon directly to it." Admiral Patel considered this information. "A direct assault would be suicide." "Not necessarily," said a voice behind him. It was Captain Frank Donovan. "My ship is small and fast. With the right modifications, we might slip through." "What kind of modifications?" the Admiral asked. "The kind that make us look like part of the swarm," Frank replied. "Dr. Harmon has developed an electromagnetic pulse weapon that could temporarily disable the swarm's central consciousness. It won't destroy them, but it might disrupt them long enough for us to strike a decisive blow. It's a one-way mission, you understand that?" Admiral Patel said quietly. Frank nodded. "Someone has to do it." As Frank prepared his ship and small crew for the mission, the battle around Earth intensified. The swarm was adapting to human unpredictability, becoming more flexible in its attacks. Earth's defenses were holding, but barely. The Conclave scout ship watching from a distance recorded everything. Its commander could hardly believe what he was seeing. The primitive humans were still fighting when the mighty Conclave had retreated. "They should have fallen by now," the commander whispered. "How are they still standing?" As Frank Donovan's ship slipped away from Earth toward the heart of the swarm, the final phase of humanity's desperate defense began. Frank Donovan's small ship moved silently through the swarm fleet. From the outside, it looked like just another swarm vessel, thanks to the material covering its hull. Inside, Frank and his 5 crew members barely breathed as they navigated toward the heart of the enemy. 2 minutes to target," Frank whispered, though there was no need to be quiet in space. "Old habits die hard." Dr. Harmon's voice came through their comms. "Remember, the EMP needs to be within 100 meters of the central node to work. Any farther, and the effect will be too weak." Frank checked the weapon one last time. It didn't look impressive. Just a metal box with some wires, but it contained humanity's best hope. "There it is," said Kate, Frank's navigator. She pointed to a large swarm ship surrounded by hundreds of smaller ones. "The node has to be inside that one." Frank guided their ship closer, moving as if they belonged there. The swarm didn't react. The disguise was working. Back on Earth, the battle reached its peak. Human ships fought with desperate creativity, but the swarm was slowly gaining ground. Cities around the world activated their defense systems as some swarm ships broke through to the atmosphere. Admiral Patel watched the tactical display showing Frank's ship approaching its target. All forces, prepare for Operation Wildcard. When I give the signal, everyone switches to your most unexpected tactic. Amy Reeves understood. They needed to distract the swarm at the critical moment, give Frank his chance. On the Conclave scout ship, the commander continued watching. More Conclave vessels had arrived, forming a small fleet at the edge of the solar system. They were waiting, observing. "Sir," one of the Conclave officers said, "why don't we help them? The humans are still fighting." "Orders are orders," the commander replied, but doubt crept into his voice. Frank's ship was now just 200 meters from the central swarm vessel. "This is as close as we can get without raising suspicion," he said. "We'll have to launch now and hope for the best." He looked at his crew, who all nodded. They knew what this meant. "Admiral, we're launching the EMP," Frank reported. "Start Operation Wildcard." Admiral Patel gave the order, and across the solar system, every human ship suddenly changed tactics. Ships that were retreating turned to attack. Defensive formations broke apart. Weapons fired in seemingly random directions. The swarm hesitated, confused by the sudden chaos. In that moment, Frank's ship shed its disguise and accelerated toward the central vessel. Swarm ships moved to intercept, but they were seconds too late. "EMP armed," Frank said calmly. "Good luck, Earth." His ship crashed into the central swarm vessel. The EMP detonated. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. Then, across the entire swarm fleet, ships stopped moving. They drifted, powerless and confused, like insects whose queen had been killed. "Now," shouted Admiral Patel, "hit them with everything we've got." Earth's forces attacked the disabled swarm with everything they had left. Ships that couldn't fight anymore rammed into larger swarm vessels. Ground-based weapons fired up into the atmosphere. It wasn't elegant, but it was effective. When it was over, the remaining swarm ships scattered, no longer connected to their central mind. Some fled the solar system, others simply drifted in space. 3 days later, the Conclave fleet entered Earth orbit. Ambassador Zixtal stood on the bridge of Amy Reeves' ship as they approached. "The Conclave High Council wishes to speak with Earth's leaders," Zixtal said. In the United Nations building, President Susan Blackwell met with the Conclave High Commander. The alien looked at her with new respect. "We called you primitive," the High Commander said. "We were wrong. What we saw as primitive was simply different. Your unpredictability, your emotions, your inefficient thinking, these were not weaknesses but strengths. We would like to offer Earth a true place in the Conclave." The alien continued, "Not as subordinates, but as equals. You have skills our civilization needs." Susan looked at Admiral Patel, who nodded slightly. "We accept your alliance," Susan replied, "but on new terms. The galaxy has changed, and so have we all." As the new treaty was signed, humans began preparing ships to venture farther into space than ever before. They would join the Conclave not as primitives, but as teachers of a different way of thinking. The primitives had saved the galaxy, and the galaxy would never be the same.